If there was any thought that came to mind when one were to bring up WCW Nitro for Nintendo 64, it would be somewhere along the lines of, why bother? Anyone who owned a Nintendo 64 video game system in its heyday and was into wrestling back when it was massively popular were probably well versed in the other WCW video games available for the console, namely WCW vs NWO World Tour and WCW NWO Revenge. Both games are highly regarded and fun little wrestling games well worth playing. WCW Nitro, on the other hand, got its start on the PlayStation in 1997 and wasn't nearly as highly regarded. Or as good for that matter. Nitro would eventually make its way over to the Windows platform in 1999, which kinda sorta made sense, I suppose. But Nitro was also ported to the Nintendo 64 in 1999, only a few scant months after N64 owners had a perfectly functional and much superior WCW video game in Revenge. Why THQ would bother porting this game over to N64, nobody seems to know, nor do they seem to care for that matter. Oh, by the way, fun fact, this is the third time I'm reviewing the same damn Nitro game. I reviewed the Windows version back in 2012 and I did the PlayStation version back in January. So I guess that covers all of them unless there's a version of Nitro that on some obscure console nobody's ever heard of that I might have missed, and if that's the case, as far as I'm concerned, they don't exist. Ever. Just like Chris Ben. Because this game was released in 1999 alongside the Windows version, this N64 conversion of Nitro is more in line with that Windows conversion than the PlayStation original in 1997, in that it features an additional Battle Royal elimination match type that wasn't in the original release, and that the roster is updated to 1998 standards, so you have guys like Goldberg, Sting in Wolfpack garb, Hall, Nash, Brett, Jericho, those guys. And you still have your usual exhibition and tag team matches, as well as the traditional tournament mode where you pick a wrestler and compete in a number of one-on-one matches on your way to win the belt. No, I'm not doing that bet again. 2 times is more than enough. What this version of Nitro does not have are full motion video clips. So instead of an opening montage of live WCW action, you get in-game actions of the various low-resolution wrestlers performing various moves. In a way, it's not a major loss, but the Nintendo 64 version also loses the wrestler rant videos that, in most people's minds, myself included, was about the only redeemable quality in the disc-based versions of Nitro, or Thunder for that matter. As a personal aside, if you were to use the cheat code that unlocks all the wrestlers, and you will, you notice that the roster is significantly less so than that of the disc versions. None of the extra jobbers, self-inserted developers, or the oddball caricatures tossed in for the lulz. No bears, no gorillas. So the only thing left to sell potential buyers on Nitro 64 is the core gameplay, which unfortunately isn't that very good. Especially on a console that had a couple better wrestling games featuring the same promotion. The object of WCW Nitro, if it isn't readily apparent, is to win matches via pinfall, submission, or countout. Moves are performed by inputting various button combinations to pull off various moves. All the wrestlers generally have the same basic movesets comprising powerbombs and pile drivers, along with a unique set of special moves that require slightly more complex button combinations. The button sequences are thankfully nowhere near as convoluted as the ones you'll have to perform in the acclaim efforts such as Warzone or Attitude, but the cumbersome nature of the button setup means you'll most likely stick with the quick basic moves instead, which amazingly do the job just fine, but control here is alright for the most part. Well, just as good as the other versions of Nitro, I suppose, which is faint praise, but at the very least it's better than Thunder. Getting past the controls and the bare bones gameplay, and there really isn't much to it. The one thing that's really off-putting about N64 Nitro is that it runs a touch quicker than the disc versions, almost like the whole game is overclocked or something. It almost made me wonder at one point whether the Windows version I played was actually running slower than it intended, since one of my grievances with the disc-based versions was the pacing. However, the PlayStation version runs about the same speed as the Windows version, so I honestly don't know what to make of the speed in the N64 port. Yeah, I know I complained about the speed of the other versions, which I said moved at a snail's pace, but this is kind of ridiculous. And it does contribute in lessening the gameplay experience somewhat, somehow. Now, as stated before, Nitro on N64 has no video, which means no video intermissions or no video rants. In other words, no point or reason for this version of the game to exist. As stated, this was the only reason you'd bother to get the game to begin with, not for the gameplay, but to see a bunch of old-timers cut promos on why you should pick them, or in Kevin Nash's case, not pick him. And without that selling point, what's left? Not much. Without video, you have no ending video for the championship mode or introductory video. Instead, you're given this entirely generic and completely uninteresting demo of two blurry wrestler models performing moves on each other, and is the same montage throughout. You don't even get the privilege of watching credits when you win the belt. I'm inspired with confidence. Now, to the game's credit, the wrestler models are rather sharp and don't have as much of a blocky or rough appearance as the ones on the PlayStation version, so there's one good point. However, the textures of the various wrestlers are a bit on the blurry side. They're clear enough so you can make out who's who, but still somewhat blurrier than on the disc versions. The various arenas you get to compete in look pretty good, all things considered. A bit sharper in some cases, a bit nicer. Not much else to say in that regard though. Sound quality in Nitro on N64 is not that bad actually, although it isn't really saying much since your musical cues comprise the main Monday Nitro theme playing on the title and menus, and some generic sounding stock quality rock music in-game. At least it's crisp and cleared sampled music and not meaty recreations. Sound effects are alright, your usual collections of slams and grunts and stuff, nothing out of the ordinary here. Nitro does feature an extremely light dose of play-by-play commentary, by which I mean a couple blurbs here and there. I suppose it's something on the N64 to have some semblance of commentary since the other games don't have them, but then again it'd probably be best just to not have any to begin with and just have some stock music or something, I don't know. After getting two top-notch and quality WCW video games on their console of choice, Nintendo 64 owners were given a rotten lemon in WCW Nitro. Even on its own merits, Nitro is not a particularly enjoyable game, as its best feature is not included here and the gameplay is shallow and weak compared to its contemporaries. Not to mention, this game runs a tad quick for its own good. I wouldn't bother with this one unless you're looking to fill a hole in your N64 collection, but if you insist on getting a version of this Nitro game, I recommend tracking down the Windows version. It has the quick loading times of the N64 version along with the video rants that the game was known for, and you can also do that modding thing where people replace the skins with other skins for good times or something, I don't know. N64 owners shouldn't bother with this one, they have a couple better options on their console of choice anyway.